Romania International. You are listening to our 1-hour broadcast in English for listeners in Western Europe and Japan. We can also be heard on the internet at www.rri.ro Channel 1. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter and other social media platforms. Our programs are also available on TuneIn and via satellite Eutelsat 16A on 11,512 MHz, vertical polarization, azimuth 16 degrees east. Symbol rate 29,950 mega symbols per second, standard DVB-S2, modulation 8 PSK, audio PID 510. We wish you good reception conditions.
I'm Ana Maria Popescu with the news. First, the headlines. Over 3,000 new SARS-CoV-2 infections were reported in Romania in the last 24 hours. 1.25 million people were working in public institutions in Romania in November 2020, and Collectiv, the Romanian documentary by Alexander Nanau, was awarded as Best Foreign Language Film by the U.S. National Society of Film Critics. Since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, the total number of coronavirus infections in Romania has passed 671,000, and the total death toll has reached over 16,600, after over 3,000 new cases and 62 deaths were reported on Sunday. 1,065 people are currently in intensive care. The largest number of cases, 825, was reported in the capital, Bucharest. Since the start of the vaccination program in Romania on December the 27th, more than 100,000 people have received the anti-COVID-19 vaccine. Mild and common side effects have been reported in 350 cases, mostly headaches, muscle pain, fever, asthenia or rashes. The next stage in the vaccination campaign, addressing the elderly and chronic patients, is scheduled to start at the end of next week. The government is to pass an emergency order granting bonuses to the personnel involved in the anti-COVID national vaccination program, the Health Minister Vlad Voiculescu announced. Family physicians who are regarded as a vital element in the immunization campaign will also be paid. Collectiv, the Romanian documentary by Alexander Nanau covering a journalist investigation into the corruption in Romanian healthcare, won the award for Best Foreign Language Film of the U.S. National Society of Film Critics. The documentary Collectiv is Romania's nomination for the 2021 Oscars in the Best International Feature Film, previously known as Best Foreign Film. This is the first time that Romania submits a documentary in the competition for the Academy Awards. As of Monday, all banks in Romania are to submit to the National Tax Agency all data on the accounts held by private individuals and businesses under an emergency order which transposes a European directive. The new legislation is designed to help the authorities fight against money laundering and terrorism financing. An electronic tax registry will become operational, containing banking and payment accounts identified by international bank account number. The agency will thus be able to monitor money circuits in Romania and to identify money laundering attempts. Romanian students resume online classes on Monday for the last 3 weeks of the first half of the academic year. A one-week vacation follows, and the second semester, beginning on February the 8th, might bring Romania's 3 million primary, secondary and high school students back into schools. This is one of the options considered by the authorities, depending on the latest COVID-19 developments. Another option is for only preschoolers and primary school students to resume face-to-face classes, while in a third scenario, 8th and 12th graders might also get back to school. 1.25 million people were working in public institutions in Romania in November 2020, over 64% of them in the central public administration. According to the Finance Ministry, nearly 600,000 of these jobs are entirely funded from the state budget. The largest number of jobs is reported in public education, almost 300,000, followed by the Interior Ministry, 125,000. Local public administration units had 450,000 employees in November, more than half of them in jobs fully financed from the state budget. Almost half of the complaints filed in 2020 to the European Consumer Center in Romania concerned the transport sector. People were unhappy with the services received from air, road, railway and naval transport companies, as well as from car rental companies. Other complaints concerned clothing and footwear, restaurants and hotels, as well as entertainment and cultural activities, the National Consumer Protection Authority says. A yellow code alert for heavy snowfalls is in place until Monday afternoon in the south and southwest of the country and the capital Bucharest. A layer of 10 to 20 centimeters of snow is expected in these areas. Snowfalls, glaze and temperatures of up to 2 degrees Celsius are forecast in Bucharest for the next 4 days. And that was the news on Radio Romania International.
This is Radio Romania International broadcasting from Bucharest. Business Flash.
Hello and welcome to Business Flash with me, Elena Enake. The registration of new cars has dropped in Romania by 21.8% in 2020 as compared to the previous year, according to figures made public by the Association of Car Producers and Importers. Thus, in 2020, 126,351 new cars were registered as against 161,562 in 2019. As regards second-hand cars, 381,495 were registered in 2020, by 14.2% less than in 2019. In the first 9 months of 2020, Romania exported 7.64 million tons of wheat and corn, down by almost 14% as compared with the same period of 2019. At the same time, the turnout was by 11.4% smaller, standing at 1.47 billion euros, according to data supplied by the Agriculture Ministry. In comparison, in the first 9 months of 2019, 8.87 tons of wheat and corn worth 1.65 billion euros had been exported by Romania to European countries. The total quantity of agri-food products exported between January and September 2020 to EU and non-EU countries exceeded by 4 million tons the imported quantity. In the first 9 months of 2020, some 12.41 million tons of agri-food products have been exported and 7.91 million tons have been imported. In the European Union, 17.2% of the population were living in overcrowded households in 2019, meaning they did not have enough rooms compared to the size of the households. Among the EU member states, almost half of the population in Romania, 45.8%, were living in overcrowded households in 2019. This was also the case for around 2 in every 5 persons in Latvia, 42.2%, Bulgaria, 41.1%, Croatia, 38.5%, and Poland, 37.6%. Compared to the previous year, the share of the population living in overcrowded dwellings fell slightly in all of these countries, with the strongest fall recorded in Poland, -1.6%. At the opposite end of the scale, the lowest overcrowding rates were recorded in Cyprus, 2.2%, Ireland, 3.2%, Malta, 3.7%, and the Netherlands with 2.8%. The number of bookings in Romanian tourist accommodation units went down by over 51.8% in the first 11 months of 2020 to almost 6 million as against the same period of 2019, according to data supplied by the National Statistics Institute. Of them, 92.7% were Romanian tourists and 7.3% were foreign tourists, who came mostly from Germany, Italy, Israel, and France. And that has been Business Flash.
This is Radio Romania International, broadcasting from Bucharest. Panorama.
Hello and welcome to this review of some of our shows from the ending week. We begin by taking a look back at some of the tourist destinations that we introduced you to in Traveler's Guide.
Hello and welcome to the first edition of 2021 of our tourism feature. I'm Clico, bringing you a review of some of the tourist destinations in Romania we presented to you in 2020. It was an atypical year with pandemic restrictions, in a year in which tourism operators tried to adapt in order to offer safe travel conditions. We started the year in a completely normal way, with no restrictions, and we headed to one of the most attractive historical provinces of Romania, Bucovina. We talked about its beautiful UNESCO monuments, about its painted churches, and also about skiing there. Not least, we have described its villages, true living ethnographic museums, where people still wear traditional garb, and where traditional craftsmen can be visited in their households, living exhibits that show traditional objects. We recommended then the most developed mountain area in Romania, with resorts with ski slopes of all degrees of difficulty, from beginners to competitive skiing. This is Valea Prahovei, which has its beginnings in tourism in the 19th century, thanks to the building of Tălăș Castle in Sinaia, the summer residence of the first king of Romania, Carol I. Vacation in Transylvania was the other offer early last year. We discovered then a perfect combination of cultures and traditions, medieval fortifications and castles, famous caves and salt mines, dreamy landscapes, and of course, traditional food that is famous all over the world. The trip started in the northwest in Bihor County. We presented the tourist attractions in the city of Oraga, an old cosmopolitan city built around a fortress. Then we found out that Bihor County is the ideal destination for those who truly enjoy multicultural display. The communities of Hungarians, Germans, Italians, and Slovaks live there in harmony, presenting to the tourists bits of history, but also traditions and customs with annual events in cities and villages. From there, we went south to the Polish Museum of Wine Growing and Fruit Growing, a place full of history where we could find an open-air ethnographic museum. From there, we took to the mountains. In Transylvania, we find the Apuseni Mountains, which are not particularly high, but have plenty of opportunities for spending free time. We started our trip right in the heart of it, in the Apuseni Nature Park, known as one of the most important biodiversity and visiting experience goes. At the end of February, we described the 43rd edition of the Romanian Tourism Fair held in Bucharest. Here, the participants competed with offers for 2020 at a time when no one could have anticipated the size of restrictions imposed because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Early in spring, we headed to the Domogled Valea Cernedaș.
is Radio Romania International.